So in 2 minutes we want to continue, so please come back inside. I'm starting to shoo people back in slowly, so we don't. Huh? Yes, please, please do. Yes, they have more. So, ladies and gentlemen, can the people outside come inside? Be so nice if you came inside. Please have a seat. So come inside. Okay. How many people are still outside? Not a lot? Okay, brilliant. So I have asked the colleagues to actually put the fruits of your work on the walls. So maybe in the next coffee break or when you have 5 minutes and you don't want to talk to anyone, you just want to have some time for yourself, maybe have a look at what the colleagues wrote, because obviously we can't share everything and all the rich discussions. And I always find it quite useful when I think about bigger things and the bigger picture to see what my colleagues were thinking. So, yeah, you can take the chance to have a walk and look at that. Okay, I know some of your time is pressed and we still have a little bit of a program in front of us. So we're going to start with the reporting back. And I think, Ottilia, you had the European values group, so I would like to give you the floor. Would you like to stand? Would you like to sit? Microphone, please. The microphone, please. Okay. Perfect. So you're reporting back from your group. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Patricia, and thank all the members of our group for a very hectic discussion. We were in the panel dealing with the European values, and there was a lot of consistency in the discussions and among the ideas that were presented. And we discussed about how the EaP CSF members can further strengthen the EU values. And here there was an almost unanimous idea that the members of the civil society can or should popularize European values in our societies. We should also do research of the public opinion to understand what are the barriers for the full internalization of European values, and we should undertake efforts at a regional level because we share our problems. Regarding the obstacles that exist in the EaP region's Europeanization efforts, I noticed here a very worrying concern that there is a decrease in belief in the European Union, which actually happens both in EaP and among EU member states. Of course, there is also an older problem, that of lack of EU values awareness and the activities that should enforce that. And also, probably linked to this decrease of belief in the EU is the unstable support or ad hoc support sometimes up, sometimes down, from European institutions. So we should make a note of that. Now, the question was also how can these obstacles be addressed? And the common understanding was that we need to promote these values through media and other means of communications, including things that are, let's say, a little bit more fancy, like digital tools. We should also develop partnerships and dialogue and cooperation with the institutions, but also strengthen the ties between EU and EaP-based CSO organizations. Also, we need to advocate more for a more consistency of our European partners in addressing the problems in our region. We also discussed a little bit about what are the successful initiatives that should be further promoted. These are, of course, and there were some examples of success stories about projects that indeed raised awareness. Also, there are some success stories in projects that fight disinformation really effectively. And some countries have really good experience on that, including in EU and EaP. The last point that I would like to raise today is what lessons learned can be shared across the EaP countries. And these include, for example, projects that target youth, as well as education to rural areas, including adult education, which has probably been less of a focus until now. And probably one of the most popular suggestions is also that we need to strengthen the networking to engage in projects that effectively fight disinformation.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Anna Otilia. Okay.
I left it on.
Okay. Then I think we would like to reverse a bit. Tatiana, can I ask you to come next? Yes. So Tatiana, you are reporting back from the group on rule of law and resisting authoritarianism.
Yes. So this group is not very big group anyway. We managed to discuss a set of issues, and first of all, it is starting from lessons learned. We have to revise mistakes and what was not going well in the previous times. That Eastern Partnership sometimes didn't make difference between authoritarian, not authoritarian countries, and we recognize that there is a threat of growing in authoritarianism, not only in EaP countries, but it is that's a world problem and in the European Union as well. And we tried to reflect a little bit on the reasons for this, on the ways how to combat it, how to deal with this. As for Eastern Partnership as a program, we would like to start with the necessity to probably revise its architecture. And revise architecture also in terms of who are the main actors, the most interested in democratization, if this program is also aimed at these things. So we have to revise priorities. And we talked about in different groups and in this process about different priorities, and also stated this necessity to work with communication, to invest in communication in terms of money, time, technologies, innovations, because communication is the most important tool to reach the societies. And we were talking about communication also in connection with this, talk about such priorities, civic education or awareness raising for citizens, not only for leaders, but for wider circles of population, and we need to outreach and to approach all possible layers of society. And we talked about also practices and necessity of this. And we also thought about revision and thinking more deeply about not only the approaches or priorities, but implementation. To be more consistent in implementation. Have no double standards. If there are sanctions, there are sanctions. If we are dealing with authoritarian regime with oil or without oil, it should be a little bit the same approaches. Otherwise, it spoils the whole idea. And consistent in implementation of different things when we talk about the rule of law or of approaching different types of European courts. Who are the judges? What are the judges? From what countries? What kind of education do they have? Whether they have human rights-based approach or they are missing very important things in their education. That is why their decisions are not consistent enough. So we have to go deeper into this implementation mode and think how we are doing things, not only planning them. We would like also we stopped that we need diversity of approaches to different countries of Eastern Partnership. I mean that they are in different situations, different problems with democracy. They have problems, but different, and different type of readiness to be in candidates or approach European Union or not. And so we have to diversify this, and we have. Yes, in approaches we have to insist on this human right-based approach in all this work. Also to think about reforms before the time X came, to prepare our vision of a democratic society and to prepare society for this, to prepare packages of reforms and to prepare to make the deliberate processes to make society ready for this and to used to be part of these discussion processes. It's very important, and you need to invest into this. Yes, not just expect that it will go its way without our assistance. And what else? Yes, and of course we mentioned such important things like in combating authoritarianism and also its way to totalitarian states sometimes. It's our solidarity. It's our solidarity between ourselves and knowledge about ourselves, and also taking some efforts to make this solidarity things happen. So this is just very briefly, and a lot of things are going deeper when we discuss.
Thank you so much.
Also
yes,
important.
Go ahead.
Sometimes also important to think out of the box, and sometimes use approaches and technologies and projects which are not usually in the list in the table of European counterparts or in NGOs and so on. Think how we can use not only European Court for Human Rights but also some arbitrage. Think how we can approach civil society in such countries as Belarus and Azerbaijan, not waiting for permission from the state, authoritarian state regime, but to find protocols of work with them out of this dependency, not to be so dependent in this, and to think about civil societies in even authoritarian countries and our main allies. That is why we have to think a little bit creatively and change maybe our habitual ways to support them.
Yes, Tatiana, it sounds like you have quite a lot in common also with the group that Anna Ottilia was in, and you seem to have a long list of things that you can undertake to improve the situation on the rule of law and resisting authoritarianism, but also to make these European values really come alive. Then I think I would like to hand over the word to Jala. There she is. I think you are reporting back from the enabling environment for civil society, right?
Right. Good afternoon, everyone. We did have a very, very interesting and active discussion, and we came up with a lot of ideas, which I will try to summarize very shortly, but of course the nuances will be reflected in a more sophisticated documents we are going to produce further on. So when it comes to the enabling environment, we started to discuss the challenges the civil society organizations are having in our countries. And one of the biggest challenges was, of course, the legislative framework and the restrictive legislation in our countries, which practically makes the registration, operation, and funding of NGOs difficult, if not impossible, in some countries. We also mentioned the lack of capacities of civil society organizations when it comes to the modern skills and specific, capacities to be able to speak publicly, to communicate all these challenges. Yet another challenge was the lack of environment as such, not just the legislative environment, but also recognition and legitimacy of the civil society in the places to be involved in all the partnerships and also the trilateral, for example, consultancy frameworks, etc. The specific challenge was the lack of the involvement of the vulnerable population, including the disabled, women and youth in the programs. Generally, the financial situation of the civil society has been mentioned more than once in all the groups, meaning that the viability of the civil society organizations is so much restricted, coming with the lack of the environment, but also the lack of the resources allocated to some countries in unequal basis and in improportionate basis. There are other also challenges when it comes to the public image, to the possibility for advocacy and the risk and for security and cyber attack the civil society activists might have if they are more vocal and more outspoken in certain cases. When it comes to the tools, the civil society's role was underlined as a very major, and the tools which the civil society and the strengths of the civil society was listed a number of the issues, number of the tools, including the big expertise of the civil society as such, including the thematic expertise, the access to stakeholders, certain capacities which are very specific to the civil society, like monitoring, reporting, advocacy, awareness raising, something which can be done only by non-state actors, and that's a value, as well as a knowledge of the region, the thing which is very often missed by the international community when they want to enter and implement certain programs in the countries. They are very often lacking the specific knowledge of the region and country, so the civil society can fill in this gap. When it comes to the recommendations of for the international stakeholders, we had a separate station which put together all the issues in relation how donors can better support, because we all understand that no matter how eager and dedicated we are to our work and to our sector, still some actions need funding, and no funding does not mean no action, but it means weaker action. That's why the donors community was encouraged to bring together the specific strategic approach, yet do not exclude the possibility for some ad hoc decisions, because very often the range of the support for the finances should also include the specific funding schema, alternative funding schema, possibility to fund some shadow activities whenever necessary, to react on some emergency situations, but also have the long-term visionary approach and strategically finance the organizations. Yet another very specific recommendation, which was common for all the Eastern Partnership countries, was the lack of the institutional support for the organizations, because in the best cases, even if the funding is available, it's very often project-oriented, while the core funding and institutional funding is missing, which makes the organizations very unsustainable in a way. Another approach was, another recommendation for the donors community was to involve the civil society into their strategic meetings, so that actually the civil society can also put certain recommendations while the strategic documents are being developed, because yet another inconsistency is when we are in front of the situation when we have to be implementing the donor-driven approaches and donor-driven priorities, which might be good. It doesn't mean that always it's useless, but it's very also good to take into account the power of expertise of the civil society. If we are to embrace the generally what the international support should be, and what EU can do in these regards, and what recommendations in general should be taken into account, that definitely can be extended, of course, from finances, which are a repetition. And this is also, we also highlighted that we should react on emergencies, yet we should not forget about the political démarche whenever necessary to provide a dignified space for the civil society to operate. So because we don't want just to be on the survival mode, we want to develop and do the work which we are so proud of with the dignity. That's why it's very important to get the political support, even more important than the financial support. Another recommendation to the international community was to differentiate between the countries. Although the common approach and equal and proportionate approach is very much appreciated, at the same time it should be mentioned that each of our countries are having very specific situations, so that we should be put under one umbrella, but yet specific approaches should be applied. And in this regard, the civil society has to be consulted throughout the way of the development again of the strategic documents. So we also welcome the introduction of the strategic partnership agreements and whatever trilateral agreements may be in the process of discussion and conclusion. So the civil society should be a strict partner of the government and of the international community in these regards. In general, we want to highlight that the civil society should be seen not just as a monitor and as watchdog, but also as an equal partner and be involved in the policy dialogues as such, which would make the role and the status of the civil society in our countries more legitimate. So, of course, there are many more nuances, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. And I believe that the documents will highlight all these small nuances. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Shala. I think also Tatiana and Anna Otilia deserved some applause. We forgot. Thank you. Yes. So we have, last but not least, Pavel with regional cooperation. It sounds that also you have some overlap with what Jala has just said, also with the donors and how you cooperate. So we're looking forward to hearing from what came out of your group.
Thank you so much, Patricia. So maybe very briefly from our group on regional development, because I think this was also quite specific. We discussed actually 5 different questions. We were discussing about what are the potential areas of cooperation. We were discussing about what can serve for the policy alignment among the 6 countries. We were also discussing what might be the limits of regional cooperation, and also we discussed 2 quite specific issues. We were discussing about what to do and if at all with Western Balkans, and we were also focusing on Central Asia. So these were 5 areas that we were discussing, so that was quite interesting. There was some overlap indeed with Shala, but of course we were discussing quite like broadly in terms of like what we can be really doing together, because that we identified as an added value. Of course, for civil society, and here we see it around the whole, that we are benefiting from the civil society cooperation, exchanging know-how, exchanging, learning from each other actually, and making each other stronger, also when expressing solidarity in more difficult contexts. But of course, there was a whole number of other areas, including education, science, culture cooperation, but also, for example, tackling some of the negative tendencies, including Russian propaganda, malign influences, you know, the war, and so on. So this is really something that was identified quite highly. We were also discussing about the business cooperation, trade sort of exchange, and also SMEs cooperating between each other. So that was about this. Then actually one interesting question, if Russia is seen as a uniting or rather disuniting factor among the 6 countries, because there are different positions on what Russia is and how it acts and so on. So that was a longer-term question probably. About this policy alignment, so that was actually how to look for more synergies, to work closer together. So we were actually calling for more investment in multilateral structures. We have here gathered under the umbrella of the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum, but there's a number of others. Also bilateral platforms for cooperation with civil society between the EU and individual countries. That is the case for Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova, and Armenia. So you see that there are a lot of structures actually that promote this kind of dialogue, but of course there is still a need for more and exchanging sort of expertise and know-how between each other. We were also looking for sort of having some common vision, so that it's quite important to do the analysis right, to look for common future and identify maybe the needs and also where we need some more support, also capacity-wise, as Shala was mentioning. So that was about the policy alignment. I'm just trying to go quickly because it's actually there was a lot. There was a really rich discussion about the challenges, about what actually prevents the regional efficient cooperation. Of course, number 1 would be Russia and Russian factor, but there was a whole list of 13 different points, including, for example, culture, sort of differences and issues. Not for all, we were able to even identify some answers. So you see that there's really more need for discussion about how to overcome some of these challenges. Some are easier than others, but then you still have, regional conflicts, you have national interests and things that are really of really profound nature and limiting also our regional cooperation in terms of civil society. So, and then I will just end on the 2 sort of overlaps. So that was quite specific, I think, for our group. So we were trying to brainstorm on what if happens, for example, when we do more with Western Balkans or also Central Asia. So on Western Balkans, I think there was quite a general agreement that there's a lot to learn from each other, especially for the countries that are currently on the enlargement track. We have Ukraine and Moldova at the first place, but also Georgia and maybe the others also. So you see the countries of Western Balkans, the 6 of them, actually for the last 20 years plus, actually engage in these processes with rather mixed results, I will say. Of course, we see that there's a lot of, and I think it was Ruslan who spoke about actually that there's a lot of pessimism, coming from Western Balkans. So I think we really need to be aware of this, and maybe learn from the past mistakes actually to do better for ourselves, to keep the high speed, for Ukraine and Moldova, possibly also Georgia. So there was a lot of this discussion, and then finally maybe on Central Asia. Of course, there was also a profound need, and I think it was Yaroslav who spoke about, really looking for the commonalities, to emphasize what brings us together. And this is at the first place really fighting the authoritarian practices, and also above all Russian Federation that is bringing chaos to the whole region. So this is what brings us together, the value perspective, especially on the civil society level. It might be a much different case on the government level. Of course, there is a lot of negative for both Central Asia and Western Balkans. So here, much different discussion, but there is a number of thematic areas such as migration, prevention of some of the negative influences, drug trafficking, terrorism, radicalization. So a lot of things that we might actually see as a negative practice, for example, coming from Central Asia, which we don't like to see in Eastern Partnership, and we need to really pay attention and also exchange, especially on the civil society level. So maybe in a nutshell, I will just remain here because actually there was so much more to report back, but I hope I did not forget, and we will have the discussion maybe to fill it in with more details if necessary. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Patricia.
much, Pavel. So, thanks, Pavel. So indeed, this is the opportunity to add anything that you missed from the reporting back, or to maybe contribute something that you think was still missing. I know there's a lot of bright minds and passionate hearts in all of your countries, but also, of course, in the countries that Pavel has just mentioned. So I'm really inspired to hear that you're looking not just for problems, but also for solutions, and that's great to hear. So please, go ahead, sir. We only have one microphone. We'll find another one, maybe. Okay.
Thank you. I am Ashot Pelikan from Armenia. I would like to speak in Russian in order to correctly express my thoughts. Значит, Атиля очень хорошо представила то, что происходило в нашей группе по европейским ценностям. И я просто хотел бы добавить и, может быть, скорректировать один акцент только. Больше речь шла не о том, что снижается интерес к ЕС, а о том, что недостаточные усилия для популяризации этих европейских ценностей в странах Восточного партнерства. Нужны дополнительные усилия, и в этом смысле она, конечно, указала, что особенно в отдаленных регионах стран, где меньше проводится вот эта работа, и в этом смысле, да, вот необходимо усилить все эти процессы. И еще, послушав, точнее, Павла Гаврильчика, у меня просто возник один вопрос, который я бы хотел, чтобы он уточнил. Вот когда речь шла о разъединяющей или отделяющей силе России, для меня понятно то, что действительно она разъединяет фактически эти страны, пытается во всяком случае активно, но мне было бы интересно, а в вашей группе какие доводы насчет объединительных каких-то процессов, потому что в этой аудитории среди представителей стран-членов Восточного партнерства очень трудно представить людей, которые вот видели вот эти объединяющие усилия России. Спасибо.
Pavel, yes, I would appreciate maybe if you can also summarize a little bit in English what the gentleman said, just for my sake.
Спасибо большое. Я попытаюсь уточнить, в чем дело. Я не говорил про это, что Россия бы соединила, но там просто мы смотрели на то, как страны Восточного партнерства могут сами про себя соединиться. Значит, против вот этой агрессии, чтобы мы соединились в этом смысле. В этом смысле. Но, конечно, Россия тоже работает как элемент разделения внутри наших обществ и тоже между нашими странами. Значит, например, вот с одной стороны позиция белорусского диктатора, а с другой просто потом Украина и так дальше. Значит, есть элемент разделения, есть элемент соединения между странами Восточного партнерства. Значит, так наоборот, так я попытался объяснить просто, в чем дело, в конце концов. Спасибо.
Thank you, Pavel, also for rectifying again. And indeed, I think also, if you feel that somebody has said something and you might not quite agree, or it's leading to misunderstandings, please be as bold as the gentleman and say what you've understood, and ask the person that said whatever they said to maybe explain again. That is just going to be very, very helpful for our conversations and to keep the conversations going, and it will overcome any misunderstandings that we might have. It's not always easy. Ruslan, please.
Thank you. I think it's better for tomorrow prepare much clear recommendation on each country. Like in Azerbaijan, we would like to mention, as I said, always repeated in previous sessions, for increasing support to the civil society in exile, evaluate everything what EU doing for the last 10 years to understand where they make mistake, to not repeat this mistake in the upcoming years, because we don't have any more time. And again, they need to closely engage with us, with the civil society, because we are seeing as like voiceless, because EU, European delegations, they are engaged with Azerbaijani government, but nobody even tried to listen our voice. Yes, thank you for inviting us to such kind of important events. It's also opportunities to raise our voices. We appreciate this, but you are our colleagues. We would like to...
I am not from the Commission, huh?
No,
Just make sure to be very clear about that. I am a neutral broker here. I do not represent any party.
I know, and that's what we'd like to give them clear address regarding Azerbaijan, because with everything what they're doing for the last 10 years, need to increasing at least for a few times, that's it.
Okay, so it's a call to have some more specific recommendations per country. And I would just like to reiterate this. I am a neutral broker. I'm here to moderate this conference. I do not represent any entity. I do not represent the European Commission. I do not represent the EaP Secretariat. I do not represent civil society. I represent only myself. And I am here to be your host and to guide you through the process. So please keep that in mind. I'm here to try and make this conference a success for you. That's my aim, and that's my only aim. I have no side. Just to be very clear about that again. Please.
Меня зовут Анна Чернева, Республика Молдова, национальный сет-лидер. По поводу того, как мы можем продвигать дальше европейские ценности. У нас в стране часто есть конфуз, такая реакция, когда кажется, что эти ценности навязываются, как бы они чужие. Я говорю о сторонах, с которыми мы между собой понимаем, то есть мы крутимся в своем кругу и говорим об этом много раз. Но когда мы коммуницируем с другими частями, представителями других секторов, очень часто напираемся на такое непонимание, что идет навязывание. На самом деле наши национальные ценности наших стран, они схожи с европейскими, об этом надо говорить. Это подтверждает, что мы можем иметь партнера, который нас усилит. И и не говорить о чем-то стороннем, что есть какая-то часть света, которая хочет там принести свои ценности. Это большая ошибка, по крайней мере, есть местные партнеры. У нас мы об этом уже говорили, о том, что говорить, насколько схожи ценности, насколько мы можем благодаря европейским ценностям укрепить нашу позицию. Это может подтверждать и усиливать нас. И это как бы рекомендация, то, что мы пытаемся делать. И, может быть, это будет полезно и для общего документа. Спасибо.
Thank you. I think it's a very important point because I think, as you are saying, this European in the values is misleading. I think it's human values we all share. We all want to be safe. We all want to be able to speak our minds. And indeed, I think all of us in the room share these values. So it's a very important point you're making. Any other points? No? Okay, shall we? Yes, go ahead, please.
I just want to comment to a certain consideration that Europe loses interest in EaP countries. So I mean that EaP countries, it was generalized that I want to say that not this happens in every country. I think in Moldova, for example, interest in Europe, if you compare, is rising. In Georgia, it is on 89%. So any polls made for last 1 year at least shows 85, 89%. So interest in EU and interest in European integration. I think in Ukraine is the same. What just happens in these three countries? Maybe in Armenia is rising as well, I know exactly. And that happens in all levels everywhere. And as regards to Azerbaijan and Belarus, we cannot be sure it is rising or not because of certain circumstances, because it is difficult really to get objective picture in these countries. It is difficult to make relevant research, to find exact figures, what happens, so it's difficult to say. But what I agree on that the authoritarian trends are rising, of course, in many of these countries. In Moldova, I can say certainly that not. That the government in Moldova is absolutely much more democratic and better than the previous governments there were during years. In Ukraine, there is war, and we cannot be sure the authoritarianism is rising or not. In the situation of war, the central power is always becoming stronger. But in Georgia, yes, certainly I can say that authoritarianism is somehow trying to get in power, and civil society very much resisting to this. And most probably this happens in other countries as well. Just to say that actually I think that this trend may be addressed by civil society, trend towards authoritarianism. And we should not allow by any means that the governments will disregard civil societies in our countries. So, because only civil society, this is proved by historical data, by research, by different type of knowledge, that civil society is the only force in any country which can stop backsliding of a country to the, in contemporary world, to the electoral autocracies. And in 200 years ago, maybe it was stopping the backsliding towards the tyranny and tyrant appearing and civil society. But now, electoral autocracies, these are the aims of modern governments, to reach this kind of power and to suppress civil society voice. And this is very important to acknowledge and to fight, of course, in any country.
Thank you. And I think you just need to tell us again who you are, because you didn't.
Yes. Kacha Gogolashvili, this Georgian Foundation for strategic and international studies.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, we also always, I always tell people recently, because I don't know you probably know I'm German, and also in Germany we have authoritarianism at some points of the society returning, and we always forget that even Hitler was elected by democratic processes. So indeed, it's civil society's role also to fight against that as good as it can. So I think we leave it at that. If you have anything more burning on your mind, that's it. You have now the chance. If you don't raise your hand, then I think, please.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Simon Slanger from the European Partnership for Democracy. And I wanted to reflect on these different themes that we discuss: cross-country collaboration, enabling environment, authoritarianism. And in terms of concrete recommendation, the issue for all these themes is funding. And there is an EU program, Citizen Engagement Value and Rights Program, SERVE, which in the regulation enables EaP country to participate, yet none of them participate. If you look at the website participating country, you see Ukraine and Moldova has expressed interest in joining, but it's the case for 1 year already. And I don't know what is the process behind, but I think in terms of advocacy, it would be key to speed up this process and also involve Belarus, Azerbaijan, even though government are not willing to engage in this program. If it is permitted by EU regulation, they should include them.
Indeed, and I think that's also the case for many other European programs, such as Erasmus+. So indeed, it's very much to the governments in those countries to request that, and maybe civil society can play a role here in pushing the governments to join these programs and make that funding also available. The SERVE is a very good example of that. Citizens and rights and values, what is it? Yeah. CERV, for those of you who are interested. Okay, then I think we will have a little break, and then we will come together again for the award ceremony. I believe it starts at 1800, so you can have a little breather. I think it's not raining outside, so maybe you can have a 5-minute walk. I'll see you again at 6 o'clock in the library area for the European Civil Society Forum Awards. Thank you very much.